They weren't shot all at once. Members of the family saw other members of the family being killed.
They say troubled minds often dwell in the youth, but nothing could prepare anyone for the twisted actions of these 6 young individuals. What started as a carjacking quickly turned into a horrifying massacre, leaving an entire family brutally murdered, except for the youngest member, the sole survivor. This is the story of the Lillelid murders, a case so shocking it would forever be etched in history as one of the most brutal crimes the police have ever faced. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this case remains unforgettable. Almost 28 years ago, in 1997, the Lillelid family became victims of a tragic murder over a seemingly small reason, all starting when the father shared his faith with a group of troubled teenagers. Now, they were the kind of family you'd want as neighbors, hardworking, loving, and deeply rooted in their beliefs. The father, Vidar, was born in Bergen, Norway, in May 1962, the youngest of 4 siblings. In his 20s, he moved to Florida, where he met the vibrant Delfina, who hailed from New Jersey and was born in March 1969. The two tied the knot in February 1989 in sunny Miami, Florida, and soon welcomed their first child, a beautiful daughter named Tabitha. With a growing family, the Lillelids sought a peaceful sanctuary away from the chaos of city life. They found their dream home in Knoxville, Tennessee, where they could nurture their children in a safe environment. By 1995, their son Peter arrived, bringing even more joy to the family. By the end of 1996, they had left their apartment behind and settled into a charming 50-year-old house in the Powell community, planning to renovate an annex for Delfina's mother. Vidar worked as a bellman at the Holiday Inn Cedar Bluff in West Knoxville, while Delfina dedicated her time to homeschooling their children. As devout Jehovah's Witnesses, their faith was the cornerstone of their lives. On the 6th of April in 1997, the Lillelid family attended a religious convention at Freedom Hall in Johnson City, about 100 miles from their home. The day was filled with hope and community spirit, and after the convention, they began their journey back home in their reliable 1987 Dodge minivan. As they traveled south on Interstate 81, a sudden pit stop would lead them to a fate they never could have imagined. Around 7:20 p.m., they stopped at a rest area, a seemingly innocent pause in their journey. 2-year-old Peter, restless and suffering from an earache, needed some attention, so Vidar decided to take him for a walk. Meanwhile, Delfina and Tabitha headed to the restrooms. On the way there, Delfina had a quick chat with a friend, Karen Sinclair, and her teenage daughter, who were also returning from the same convention. As Vidar and Peter waited by the visitor center, 2 young girls emerged, and Vidar, ever friendly, smiled and asked them if they believed in God. To his surprise, they replied that they did not. Just then, 2 young men joined the scene. When Vidar offered to share more about his faith, one of the men responded with interest. This encounter marked the beginning of a chilling turn of events. The 2 young men, 20-year-old Joseph Reisner and 14-year-old Jason Bryant, had an unsettling agenda. Alongside them were 2 young women, 18-year-old Natasha Cornett and 17-year-old Karen Howell. As Vidar began to explain the basics of the Jehovah's Witness faith, Delfina and Tabitha soon joined them. But out of nowhere, Joseph returned from his car where 2 other friends, 19-year-old Edward Mullins and 18-year-old Crystal Sturgill, were waiting. In a shocking twist, he pulled out a 9mm gun and declared, "I'm sorry about this, everybody. Just be quiet, and nothing's going to happen to you. All we need is the van." Now, if you're wondering why these troubled teens needed a car when Joseph already had his own vehicle, well, it's all because of desperation. Joseph's blue Chevrolet Citation was barely running and wouldn't last much longer. He had just received a speeding ticket, adding to his anxiety about getting caught. On top of that, they were in a tight spot financially. Joseph and his friends had stolen 2 guns and some cash before leaving their hometown of Betsy Lane in Kentucky. Desperation hung in the air. They needed a reliable getaway vehicle, and they were running out of time before their families or the police could catch up with them. So, with the gun in hand, Joseph ordered the family to return to their minivan. Vidar, hoping to defuse the situation, offered to give the group his wallet and keys, but they refused. The Lillalead family was forced into the van alongside Joseph, Natasha, Karen, and Jason. Vidar was made to drive, and as they pulled out of the rest area, Edward and Crystal followed them in Joseph's car. Now, these young individuals were far from innocent. Each member of this troubled group carried a heavy burden of a dark past. Broken homes, academic failures, and experiences of emotional and sexual abuse marked their lives. Substance abuse, including drugs and alcohol, was a common thread that connected their stories. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. In fact, just 2 days before their encounter with the Lillalead family, they had stayed at the Collie Motel on US 23 in Pikeville, Kentucky. It was there that they took part in disturbing activities, even going so far as to burn 666 into the carpet as part of their twisted games. Engaging in seances and satanic rituals, they showcased just how deeply they had descended into darkness. It was believed that the sinister plans of this troubled group began to take shape after their stay at the motel. Following that unsettling time, they returned to Natasha's trailer, where they shared chilling news with her mother, Madonna Wallen. They announced their intention to start Armageddon, with Karen ominously declaring that the end of time was coming on Sunday, April 6th of that year.
Think they could start the Armageddon. I know a lot of people don't believe in demons and the powers of the dark, but they're very real.
On that fateful day, the group took a dangerous step further. They devised a plan that would lead them to the home of a local police officer. Jason created a disturbance outside, drawing the officer's attention, while the others snuck inside. In their reckless pursuit, they managed to seize 2 guns, 2 boxes of ammunition, and around $500. Now, Natasha, in particular, was just as troubled as the others in the group. Desperate to escape the harsh reality of her life, she claimed to have been in contact with angels and demons since she was only 4 years old. This early exposure to such dark and mystical ideas fueled her growing fascination with witchcraft. Over time, her obsession became so intense that she began referring to herself as Satan's daughter. This unsettling identity was accompanied by violent tendencies. She even threatened her own mother with a knife, a stark indication of how deeply disturbed she had become. However, she would also share in court how her mother had physically abused her at such a young age.
I remember when she was fixing my hair before daycare, she would get real upset and she'd start pulling it out and dragging me by the hair of the head, and sometimes she'd hit me in the head with a brush and stuff like that, and throw brushes and stuff at me.
Wow, what had you done?
I don't know. I mean, she said that I sassed her, but I don't remember doing it. She'd hit me with her fist, or she'd grab whatever was near her and hit me with that.
But her friends were all too familiar with Natasha's obsession with violence. She often talked about her desire to live out the chaotic storyline of her favorite movie, Natural Born Killers. This film, infamous for its exploration of madness and bloodshed, struck a chord with her, serving as both inspiration and justification for her darker impulses. Moreover, Natasha's reckless lifestyle mirrored the intensity of her beliefs. From a young age, she had been drinking alcohol and experimenting with a range of illegal drugs, including heroin, ecstasy, and cocaine. Apart from that fact, Natasha was extremely close to Karen, who also grew up in a violent household. Karen claimed that she was allegedly sexually assaulted between the ages of 5 and 10 by both her uncle and cousin. But just like Natasha, she also had a fascination with the occult and witchcraft, and she regularly used illegal substances.
Did you first begin with the Ouija board?
Yes.
And after the Ouija board, you got into automatic writing.
Yes.
Now, so His Honor can understand, automatic writing is when you call upon spirits to enter you.
No.
Spirits do enter you in automatic writing, don't they?
Yes, but you don't have to call upon them to get them to come into you.
Now, interestingly, Joseph, the oldest member of the group, had always been known as a good student. However, everything changed after his mother and stepfather divorced. The split deeply affected him, pushing him into a world of drinking and drug use. Initially, he had been dating Natasha, but as things shifted, he found himself in a relationship with Karen. Meanwhile, Natasha was involved with another group member, Edward. Edward seemed to have the most stable life among them. He was focused on earning his general educational diploma and worked at a grocery store, showcasing a sense of responsibility that others in the group lacked. But once he started dating Natasha, everything began to change. Additionally, Jason, the youngest of the group, was already on probation. Despite his young age, he had a troubling history of drug and alcohol abuse. With an IQ of around 85, his emotional and social skills were significantly underdeveloped, making it hard for him to connect with others. In a bizarre attempt to prove his toughness and earn respect from the group, he even allowed Natasha to carve her initials into his arm. Crystal, a relatively new member of the group, had her own struggles. While she did well in school, she faced emotional neglect at home. In December 1996, everything took a darker turn when she accused her stepfather of sexual abuse. This brave move led to her being thrown out of her house, leaving her homeless. For the next few months, she bounced around, staying with various people, including Natasha, who took her in during this tumultuous time. At this point, it's pretty clear that these young teens were really lost and had been through a lot of tough stuff. But that doesn't make their actions any better. They still murdered others. Going back to the night of the attack when the teens abducted the family, Delphina did her best to keep her kids calm by singing. But her sweet attempts were met with frustration when Jason snapped at her to shut up. But in the middle of all this chaos, young Tabitha, with her innocent heart, tried to lighten the mood by offering Karen one of her chocolates. And just before 9 p.m. that night, 2 calls buzzed into 911 reporting gunshots on Payne Hollow Lane in Greenville. One neighbor claimed they heard the shots and noticed 2 cars pull up, but only one drove away. The second caller, a contractor working on a nearby water tower, reported hearing 2 quick bursts of gunfire, followed by a chaotic noise that reminded him of kids playing on a playground. Deputy Jeff Morgan and his supervisor rolled in around 9 p.m. They first spotted the headlights of a blue Chevrolet Citation, oddly angled on the road. It looked abandoned, stuck on a stump in the muddy ground. The car was empty and its license plate was missing. But what they discovered next to the car would haunt them forever. In a ditch nearby, they found 4 bodies, a man and a woman, with a young boy and girl resting on top of them. 6-year-old Tabitha was draped over her father, Vidar, while 2-year-old Peter was lying on his mother, Delphina. Tragically, all 4 had been shot, and Vidar and Delphina's legs were crushed, marked by tire tracks. As the police dug deeper into the investigation, little Tabitha made a slight movement, prompting officers to rush her to the hospital. Doctors at the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville worked tirelessly throughout the night to save her, but sadly, she was pronounced dead the following day. Meanwhile, Peter lay across his mother's body, his face buried in the mud. When Deputy Jeff Morgan turned him over, Peter let out a heartbreaking cry. The deputy quickly sat down and held him close until the ambulance arrived. Peter was also rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, He survived, but not without significant injuries. He suffered severe spinal damage and lost an eye. Doctors feared he could have suffocated if he had been left in the mud any longer. During the autopsy, they determined that the family had been lined up along the ditch and shot one after another. It's believed that Vidar was killed first. He was shot in the right eye, an injury that would have knocked him out instantly. While lying in the ditch, he was shot 4 more times. Delfina was initially shot in her left arm and then in her left leg. Neither wound was fatal. However, she was shot 6 more times, and it's believed she was still alive during the horrifying attacks on her children and when she was run over by the minivan. Tabitha suffered a single gunshot wound to the head, while Peter was shot twice. The first bullet entered behind his right ear and exited through his right eye, and the second bullet struck him in the back as he tried to escape. The Chevrolet Citation had gotten wedged on a tree stump, so the 6 attackers jumped into a minivan, driving over Vidar and Delfina as they sped away. Even though the license plates from the Citation were removed, authorities were able to trace the owner through the vehicle identification number. It led them to Joseph's mother, Mary. She informed the police that she hadn't seen her son in 2 days and didn't know where he was. However, she did know who he was with and provided the police with the names of the other 5 members of the group, all of whom were also missing. The police now had a clear idea of who they were searching for and the vehicle they were traveling in. As the group made their way through Georgia, they decided to stop at a Waffle House for a bite to eat. However, they didn't stay long. When a group of police officers entered the restaurant, the group quickly left, clearly on edge. They had originally planned to head to New Orleans, but instead, they changed their route and aimed for Mexico. Upon reaching the border, they encountered trouble. They were denied entry because they didn't have the right identification. After some effort, they managed to find a way into the country. However, things took a turn when Jason Bryant was shot in the hand and leg during their time in Mexico. The group was eventually stopped by Mexican police, who, upon hearing their claims of being lost, ordered them out of the van for a search. During this search, officers discovered a knife and a photo album that belonged to the Lillelid family. After being ordered to return to the United States, they crossed back over the border, where American Border Patrol officers conducted another search. It was here that they were arrested and taken to a jail in Arizona. Shockingly, just 2 days after the murders, several of the suspects still had personal items belonging to the Lillelid family in their possession. Natasha had a piece of Vidar's belt and a picture of Tabitha tucked away in her purse. Karen was found with a Hello Kitty diary lock that belonged to Tabitha, and Crystal had the key ring from the Lillelid family home. None of these items were of any real value, suggesting they were trophies from their gruesome crimes. At that time, the district attorney sought media attention to extradite the group back to Tennessee to face trial, making it clear that he would pursue the death penalty for the 4 adults involved. The juveniles, Karen and Jason, were looking at potential life sentences without the possibility of parole. The outrage over the senseless and random killings was palpable in Knox County. One convenience store owner hung 6 nooses on a scaffold in front of his business, stating that while he was against lynching, he supported capital punishment. A crowd gathered, chanting, "Burn in hell," as the 4 adults were escorted by deputies back to Greene County Criminal Court. The judge denied repeated defense requests to try the 6 defendants separately, but ruled that finding a fair jury in Greene County would be impossible. Instead, a jury would be brought in from Bradley County, about 150 miles away. The trial date was set for March 1998. However, it never took place. In February of that year, all 6 defendants pleaded guilty to charges of murder and attempted murder as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty.
I don't think I have any choice in the case, as far as you're concerned, Ms. Cornett, but to sentence you in each of counts 18, 19, and 20 to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
The actual truth of who fired the fatal shots and what role each person played remained unclear. Each of the 6 defendants tells a different story about what happened when they arrived at Payne Hollow Lane, and those close to the case struggle to fully believe any one version of events. Natasha, Karen, and Joseph all maintain that it was 14-year-old Jason who was the sole shooter. They claim that once they exited the van, there was an argument over what to do with the family, at which point Jason started shooting. However, many people believe that the idea of a single shooter doesn't align with the forensic evidence. Some think there were at least 2 shooters using 2 different guns. Jason insists that the other 3 made up their stories when they realized he wouldn't be facing the death penalty and might get a lighter sentence due to his age. He claims that it was Joseph and Edward who fired the weapons that night. Most accounts agree that Crystal, who has always insisted she did not hurt anyone, did not leave the car during the shootings. Regardless of their differing stories, all 6 were handed the same sentence: 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional consecutive 25-year sentence for Peter's attempted murder. Appeals were filed for Karen Howell and Jason Bryant due to a later U.S. Supreme Court decision that restricts the imposition of life sentences on juveniles. However, these appeals have been denied, and all 6 defendants still remain in prison in Tennessee. As for 2-year-old Peter, who fortunately survived the attack, his life took a significant turn following the tragic events. After his medical condition stabilized at the end of April 1997, a custody battle ensued between his maternal grandmother, Lydia Celaya, residing in Miami, Florida, and his paternal aunt, Randy Heyer, living in Sweden. The deciding factor in the case was Heyer's commitment to raising Peter in the faith and teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. On July 1, 1997, local judge Fred McDonald awarded custody to Heyer. Peter was raised in the Stockholm area by Heyer and her family. By 2007, when he was about 12 years old, he was still experiencing difficulty walking due to the injuries sustained during the attack. However, by 2017, Peter had completed his IT education and was actively seeking employment. In 2019, he made the decision to move back to the United States to pursue a career in technology. He married in 2020, and he and his wife Caitlin now reside in Connecticut.
Frankly, few people have the courage or motivation, I should say, to ask why. But of course, that's what puts me apart from most other people, my story that is.
In a related note, on August 24, 2001, one of the defendants, Cornett, and death row inmate Krista Pike were allegedly involved in an attack on a fellow prisoner, Patricia Jones. They nearly strangled Jones to death using a shoelace after Pike and Jones were placed in a holding cell with Cornett during a fire alarm. Although the Department of Corrections suspected Cornett's involvement, investigators found insufficient evidence to charge her with aiding Pike, who was subsequently convicted of attempted murder. The district attorney at the time claimed in several interviews that the 6 youths had planned a killing spree inspired by the popular film Natural Born Killers. However, this theory is highly disputed given that the violent acts began and ended with the Lillelid family at Payne Hollow Road. The district attorney also stated that the bodies were arranged in the shape of a cross, a claim that Sheriff David Davenport, who investigated the scene, refuted. According to Davenport, the teens were simply trying to escape the situation and did not attempt to arrange the bodies in any particular way. But honestly, one can only hope those teens face some serious consequences for what they did. The community hasn't forgotten this case. It still resonates deeply with many. Fast forward 25 years and a small gathering took place to remember the Lillelid family at the exact same spot where they were last found. One of the gatherers present during that time, Waddell, along with his partner Jeff Morgan, were the first Greene County Sheriff's Department patrolmen on the scene on April 6, 1997. They thought they were responding to a disturbance call involving drunks shooting guns on Payne Hollow, but what they found has haunted them ever since.
I can still see them laying there. Yeah, it never leave. It's just something you got to deal with.
And it's true. The Lillaleed family did no harm to anyone and lived as normal people who simply wanted to share their faith. Yet they were met with a gruesome murder. Fortunately, Peter has no memory of that horrific night and what the six did to him and his family. Even a journalist once said, "April 6th never fails to remind me of the horrific tragedy that befell the Lillaleed family, all because of a chance stop at an interstate rest stop." In my almost 8 years as a print journalist, this is the story that moved me to tears. So, if you were Peter and had forgotten everything about that night, would you be able to forgive the killers who took away your family? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you enjoy the way we create these videos and want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.